Paul once wrote a letter asking a friend to bring him his scrolls and his parchments. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 13. A small, practical request buried near the end of one of his last letters. Almost nobody stops on that verse. But one of those exact kinds of parchments, a copy of Paul's own writing, sat completely unread for 700 years, hiding in plain sight the entire time. I used to read that verse and skip right past it, just Paul asking for his coat and his books before winter. It never occurred to me that the physical object itself, the parchment, could carry its own story, one that outlasted the man who wrote on it by over 1,000 years, and then went completely quiet after that. Most people assume that when something this old goes missing from history, it's because of fire, war, or plain neglect, a slow decay nobody bothered to stop. That happens often enough. But this manuscript didn't disappear through carelessness at all. It disappeared because of a deliberate decision made by people trying to preserve something else entirely. Here's how it happened. Sometime around the 6th century, a scribe produced a careful copy of Paul's letters. Scholars call it Codex H today. For hundreds of years afterward, it stood as one of the most valuable physical witnesses anyone had to the actual wording of the New Testament, the kind of manuscript textual scholars build entire arguments around. Then, in the 13th century, at a monastery on Mount Athos in Greece, monks took that codex apart. Before you picture something violent, understand this. Parchment was expensive, animal skin, carefully treated, meant to last generations. Reusing older pages to patch or rebind other damaged books was ordinary, practical, unremarkable work at the time. Codex H was broken up, its pages repurposed, some of them eventually bound into entirely different manuscripts, scattered across different libraries in different countries. Here's the detail that makes the rest of this story possible. Before the codex was ever taken apart, someone had already gone through it and re-inked the whole thing, tracing over every faded letter with fresh ink so the words wouldn't be lost to time. That re-inking left something behind, faint ink residue that had bled through onto the facing pages, invisible to anyone reading normally, but chemically still there. Those traces stayed exactly where they were, on pages people held, studied, and stitched into other books, and no one ever realized it. Faint isn't the same as erased. This year, a team from the University of Glasgow, led by researcher Garrick Allen, working alongside the early manuscripts electronic library, brought multispectral imaging equipment to those scattered, damaged pages. Think of it the way a doctor uses an X-ray to find a hairline fracture no eye could ever spot on its own. Except here, the camera photographs a page under dozens of different light wavelengths, ultraviolet, infrared, and everything between. Then layers those images together on a computer until the ghost of old ink separates itself from whatever was written on top of it later. But here's where it gets strange. Nobody expected much. Ghost traces like this are usually fragments, a word here, a smudge there. What came back instead was 42 pages, not scraps. 42 full pages of Paul's own letters, unread by human eyes for centuries. Recovering an image is one thing, proving it's genuine is another matter entirely. So the team didn't stop at the imaging. They brought in radiocarbon dating specialists in Paris to test the actual parchment fibers, independent of the ink, independent of the imaging technology. The dating placed the material squarely in the 6th century, exactly where scholars had already expected this manuscript to sit. The physical evidence and the historical timeline lined up precisely, which is exactly the kind of cross-check that separates a real discovery from wishful reading dressed up as science. And it's the same standard any serious archaeological claim has to clear before before scholars will treat it as fact rather than speculation. If you're the kind of person who finds this genuinely fascinating, a page nobody could read suddenly speaking again after 7 centuries, that's exactly the kind of story this channel exists to tell. Stick around because it gets better. So what was actually sitting there, invisible, all that time? 2 things stand out. First, these recovered pages preserve the earliest known chapter divisions for Paul's letters that scholars currently have. And in places, they don't line up with the chapter breaks printed in your Bible today. Ancient readers were, in some sections, organizing the same text differently than we do now, which tells scholars something real about how the church's understanding of these letters developed, rather than arriving fully formed from day one. Second, the pages hold the earliest known evidence of something called the Euthalian apparatus, a set of reading aids and structural notes that early scribes, working in a tradition tied to a figure named Euthalius, added specifically to help ordinary readers work through Paul's dense, winding arguments. This manuscript isn't only preserving Paul's words, it's preserving one of the church's earliest, most human attempts to help people actually understand them. Proof that even in the 6th century, someone cared enough about ordinary readers to build a study guide into the margins. Garrick Allen, the researcher who led this project, said that given how important Codex H already was to understanding the New Testament's text, recovering this much new evidence about what it originally looked like is nothing short of monumental. Sit with the number for a second. 700 years. That's roughly the distance between right now and the last Crusades. None of the usual culprits took this text. No fire, no war, no deliberate act to silence it. It simply sat there, on pages people held in their own hands, waiting. That should make you ask a bigger question than just how the technology worked. It should make you ask how many things in your own life you've quietly filed away as permanently gone simply because you personally couldn't see them anymore. Maybe it's a relationship you decided had nothing left worth saving. Or maybe it's a version of your own faith, the kind you held before life got complicated that you assumed you'd lost access to for good. Codex H says otherwise. The ink was never actually gone. It just needed a different kind of light and someone patient enough to go looking for it. Some things aren't erased. They're just waiting for the right light and somebody willing to look. Does that change how you think about something you've already written off as permanently lost? Most of us are carrying at least one thing like that. What's yours? There's another manuscript surfacing from this same research, this one belonging to a Babylonian king who was convinced for a time that he had actually become a god. That's coming next.